Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Women Serve 2. Today we have Jackie Frederick with us. She is a retired lieutenant colonel, wife, mother of 4 small children. She is currently working on expanding their lives through financial independence, travel, and educational freedom. And last but not least, by being a stay-at-home mom after 20 years of military service. Her post-military remote work has included a fellowship with Children's Health Defense, DoD consulting, real estate investor, Central Baptist Church administrator, accountant, and chief operating officer with nutrition advisor. Her military work includes experienced speechwriter and air battle manager with a demonstration history of working in the military industry at the tactical and strategic levels. She's skilled in U.S. Department of Defense, government business process improvement, requirements development, public speaking, and tactical communications. She's also an expert in the field of multi-domain command and control, so MDC2. She's a strong professional with a master's degree focused on international relations and conflict resolution from the American Military University, which I am also proud to say that I also graduated from AMU with my bachelor's, not my master's, but my bachelor's. So it's nice to have a fellow alumni. So Jackie, thank you so much for being on the show. So you obviously have a very impressive background with military experience. Let's kind of talk about your military journey, what you went through as far as joining and essentially all of your tactical and strategic levels.
Hold on. I'm just trying to. No, so I joined in 2002 through officer training school. I went to Appalachian State. It's actually turned down the first time I applied to officer training school, finally, and was accepted on a tougher board, which is strange. Got in and actually met my future husband in OCS. So that was fun. Did the air battle manager route. The recruiter had no idea what it was, but it was flying, so I was okay with it, and just kept moving forward. And moved anywhere from training at Tyndall in Florida to Oklahoma to Alaska, then Korea, then Virginia, and did a myriad of jobs throughout all of that, and was able to finish up here actually in the Air National Guard the last 4 years of my career. My husband and I were both military. We were mill to mill. We were commissioned the same day, same rank, everything. Unfortunately, he contracted multiple sclerosis and was medically retired at year 6.5. So we did the mill-to-mill thing just like you did for a good while. Had the rule of let's not talk about work at home. So we were stationed together and served together in Alaska. And after that, he became the father mommy, so the fammy. So we started having kids in Alaska and then Korea. But I joined the Guard because he broke his neck actually and needed to have surgery and needed to have continuity of care with medical doctors that had already treated him. And so all the referrals were in place. So we asked the Air Force for us to stay in Virginia for 1 more year to settle out all of his medical stuff. And they said, no, you can still go to Oklahoma. And I said, no, I'm going to join the Air National Guard because I had met a really good group of guys and was able to slide into that role as still active duty. So I still have an active duty retirement. The only thing that changed was my patch. And then the COVID mandate rolled around in August 4th of 2021, and my 4th child was born 3 days before the mandate, and I nursed my children. And when I went to Appalachian, remember that? I like to keep my body as clean as possible, and I was not about to take something that Pfizer said they did not know what it would do to breastfed babies. So my leadership was very much on board. I was very blessed to have leaders that accepted the stance that I was taking. I was up for 06, and they submitted me for 06. Going to in the next couple months. So it was literally, they had a whole plan and everything. I just had to wait a year to tell. And the COVID mandate kind of said I had to stop and pull out and retire. So that's where I'm at now. So I'm still trying to figure out what retirement is.
That's so crazy because I know there was a lot of backlash with the whole mandated COVID thing. And I believe, please correct me if I'm wrong, that a lot of people are getting compensated for being kicked out because of that.
Not yet. So that's a whole
Okay.
other ball of wax. The call did come to where those that were kicked out could come back in if they so chose, but there's a whole board of accessions that has to happen. It's BCMR is what it's called. And they have to go back and get their military records corrected. And then once they get it corrected, and then they, DFAS will look at what the back pay looks like. If you made more money on the outside than you did on the inside, you actually could wind up paying to come back. It's not a back pay. that's straight back pay. It's back pay based on what you made in your civilian sector. So unfortunately, they do a difference equation of that. And some people, it's either net zero or you actually have to pay. So it's not, and only, I think there's only been like, the latest numbers I saw was like maybe 7 people had come back in. So it's not a thing. So they look like, it looks like it's a thing, but it's not. And you got to remember, the majority of us that got out were not kicked out. We separated on our own accord or retired on our own accord. And that was never captured in a climate assessment survey or an exit survey or anything. So they don't even know that I got out because of COVID. Like, that was never written down anywhere. They haven't asked me back.
That is so wild. Like, let's kind of go back from the beginning, because you and your husband were both mill to mill. What did that look like? And especially since having kids and then him also developing that medical condition.
So it was interesting. You know, I did not follow Christ when we got married, and I was saved with my first child in my belly. So I was only saved like 14 years ago. So our walks have changed since then. At the time, I was more trying to fit in as a fellow peer male, if that makes sense. So I was not being the female. And this is where I believe, and this may ruffle some feathers, but I really do believe that women in the military do much better when we embrace our God-given talents of nurturing and being the calming influence in the room and being more organized. And then, we're taskmasters. That's what we do. So put us on the tasks, right? We can make it happen. We will figure out a way, right? And we're creative thinkers. Men are more of the broadsword, the brute force, the let's move out, whereas the women are more of the reasoning, the logical thinking. So it's absolutely a team that's very valid to have is the male female team, and so in the military. And so I think a lot of us as women, and this is where I went wrong early on before I was saved, is I was trying to be the man. I was trying to act like a man. The cussing and the drinking and all the things. And when I started having kids, and that's interesting you ask that question, because once I started having kids, my whole persona changed. And actually I was more accepted by my male peers once I started being more of a female. And so it's interesting that we have this belief that women aren't accepted. But when we embrace being that woman, I think we are more accepted by most men. It's when we start to act differently and try to take on the male persona that's when we ruffle feathers. So now it's been, with his MS, though, that has led me down the road of a bunch of discovery for the medical side of things. So I don't have any certifications behind my name, but I am the unofficial, like, doula, lactation consultant, functional medicine person, with all the circles and friends. And it landed me the role at Children's Health Defense, to where I was able to bring in the military health issues under their banner, and they had not done that before. So that was an interesting year of my life.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Like, what was that process? Because he obviously got medically retired, and there's certain doctors that need to be worked with for patients with MS. So how did the Air Force help you with trying to get that care, or did they?
Well, so for him, the neurologist is the one that primarily diagnosed him with MS, and it's kind of a funny story, actually. So he went into, he had his first bout, which actually he lost vision, and his right eye, it was like a shade, was pulled down because he had optic neuritis. He had a lesion on his optic nerve, and he had just moved to Alaska, and that was hard for him because I wasn't actually there with him. Then he had another bout where he went numb on his whole right side. And so all of this led to meeting with neurologists. And the neurologists, actually, military neurologists, had an airman that was learning how to do spinal taps. My poor husband was getting had like 7 pokes to get the spinal tap right. If any of you had children, you know what that feels like. So he had, he had 7 of them, and he was a young lieutenant, and the I think it was the neurologist or flight or whoever it was a captain, and he started cussing because he was so mad, because he's like, oh, this hurts so bad. He's like, I'm sorry, sir. I'm sorry. Guy's like, no, it's fine. I get it. Yeah, anyhow, it was just multiple sclerosis was when you had multiple lesions. So because he had the lesion with the and that's when he was designated multiple sclerosis. And the doctors did their best to treat him and threw all the medicines at him and all the things. And quite frankly, with what I've learned, the medicines are not going to make things. They might make things better for the short term, but they they did not work and they did not do what they were supposed to. And so if you're asking, like, did they support us? They supported us in the way that conventional medicine does, yes. And then he was transitioned to the VA healthcare system. And that wasn't actually too terrible, but there were some changes that happened to the VA system in the last 10 years that have been very helpful, so that you can go out and see Office of Community Care, like go outside the bases and stuff like that. For him, his help that he needs is in the non-allopathic, the non-conventional medicine route, focusing on internal healing instead of throwing medicine at it. No, the VA system, the TRICARE system, does not support that, so they don't really help with those kinds of bills and those kinds of tests and those kinds of supplements that he needs. But if we were to choose the conventional route, they would give us what we needed. So we haven't had any issues with that.
Because you mentioned that you wanted to stay in Virginia for another year, and then because of the care that he was getting, like, what was that process, and how did you both decide as a family to go from active duty to Air National Guard?
That's what you're saying. So for him, he had a cornea transplant in one of his eyes. So the eye doctor he pioneered the treatment is here in Richmond, because we live in Eastern Virginia. So then he had a disc replacement put in his neck, where he has a titanium disc. His orthopedic surgeon, or whoever it is that does that, I can't remember, they're here as well. When he fell because his vision was not even, and he stepped off the ladder thinking the step was there. He fell and he landed and here and on his elbow, to where it stretched it out, and it actually broke the transverse process over here. So we didn't know if he needed care with the doctor that did this, the doctor that did this, right? So all of this caused that fall. And so we didn't know if he needed that care and follow-up care. But he also went numb in his left hand from the fall. And so nerve pain or nerve takes upwards of a year to heal. And so we didn't know if it started in his neck. We didn't know if it was something where he had to be cut open by that same surgeon again that had put the disc in. And so we evaluated our situation, and I had just met the right people at the right place at the right time to inquire about a job on the CG staff here. It's where you interface with Air Combat Command as a Guard member. And so I had met the right people, and I was pregnant actually with my third kid at the time too. So throw that in there. We prayed about it, and it was clear as day to just do it and jump, and everything lined up perfectly. Everything worked out. He still has some numbness in the arm, but he was able to go and get it scraped and get it fixed. And eventually he didn't need to have the docs here, but he did develop a cataract in that eye where he had the surgery done by that individual. So it was a good thing that he stayed. But what really made us stay, or convinced me to make that choice, was my husband's a quiet man. And he voiced that he had found his mentor in this area. And our church, you go all over the world trying to find the right church almost, right? And so when we found our family here, our church family here, and he said he found his mentor, that's when I said, okay, it's time. We need to settle and put down roots. And so everything was perfectly lined up for us to do so.
So let's talk about, because you said that you were pregnant with your third, let's talk about how to have essentially a healthy family while you were serving.
It was very, very essential. So I learned with my husband's MS, once we had our first child, we still vaccinated somewhat with him, and I nursed him until he was a year old. And I was able to do that with my command at the time. And so I have to go back up to that in a minute, because there was an issue. There was a hiccup. The subsequent children, we learned to keep their bodies as clean as possible, and my leaderships all had been very accepting of me pumping and still nursing my children. However, the first one, I'm now since friends with the commander that this happened with, so I will say that it got cleared up. So this situation did get cleared up, but it was very bad. This was previous directives where you had to go back to TDY or deploy or whatever at 6 months. And so my son was 7 months old. We had just moved to Korea. We were getting ready to go 2 hours down the road to an exercise where I was going to have to work 16-hour days. And I had done the job that it was required of me many times before, so I knew what the timeline was. But it was 2 hours down the road. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to arrange through the exercise director, through everybody and their brother, I'm going to arrange for my husband and my son to come and stay at a hotel so that I could sleep with my son at night, nurse him, and pass off milk, because I was still pumping. So I had arranged everything. And I was told, because it was Korea and we don't know the status of healthcare in a foreign area that doesn't speak English, of which I had arranged, and it was fine. I was told that I could not take my husband and son, that I needed to switch to formula in a week, just for a 2-week TDY. So I said, I'm not going. I'm sorry, I'm not going. And so I got served an LOR for that. And I had another one of those perfectly timed things. I had just been doing my PME and read AFDD1, where it said that service before self does not mean service before family. And so I quoted that in my rebuttal, and they luckily threw out the LOR and everything. But that was after I went to MEO, I went to JAG, I did everything I needed to, because it was not a good situation. And I was forced to choose the health of my son over just a 2-week TDY. That they didn't think, the reason why is they didn't think I was going to work the long hours. They thought I was going to skirt out of the long hours to be with my husband and child. I'm like, no, they didn't know me at the time either. So, because I was new to the command. But in the end, it all worked out. So it was fine. But it was definitely one of those lessons learned that I took to General Deal, who was the A3, who was up at, he actually came down to do a briefing with why minorities are getting out of the Air Force. So there was a huge panel that we gathered here at ACC to discuss why minorities are getting out. And I explained to them, I said, look, this is what happened to me. It was so simple. All I needed to do was pass off milk. It wasn't a big deal. Everything was taken care of, and they made it a big deal. And so they were like, whoa, and they took it and wrote it and used it and all that stuff.
Have you seen changes since that happened? Like, as far as like moving forward for women who don't have to experience that?
Absolutely. And so with all the breast pods, the breast milking pods and all the things, I later then, the commander of this same unit, it was a new commander that had come in, but he knew what had happened to me. And he was a Christian, and we're still very good friends too. And he actually set up a whole separate nursing room for me after my second child, with a sign and everything. And so, where I didn't have to do it in the bathroom, because the previous one I had to do it in the bathroom. And you're not supposed to, because the regs and all that. And it's, I didn't mind doing it in the bathroom. It was just, it's not healthy. It's not sanitary. So, but with my third, not a question. My fourth, she wouldn't take the bottle. So I was able to go home, or my husband would bring her for lunch. So yes, after that first baby, the nursing situation greatly improved. And so it wasn't something that was much of an issue. But I still had to go through it with that first one. It was pretty awful.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine. I didn't have any kids while I served, but I know some women had issues, especially with like the whole breastfeeding, and then still having to do the mission and stuff like that.
Well, I will say also, just to add to that, there's 2 points. One is in Korea, you would be on scope for, I don't know, 6 hours, maybe 4 to 6 hours. And I was told, you need to take care of that pumping right now. And I'm like, I just got here. I can't. I don't have anything. And that was the same individual who caused me to get the LR before. And so after that, I just made it quiet where I went and pumped. And I did have to, there were some days that I was not able to pump. And you try to do it on a schedule. But I learned as I had more children that it's a little bit more fluid. It doesn't have to be exactly at, 2:00. You can do it just as long as you do it in the afternoon. But with the subsequent children on number 2 and 3, so I've had 13 miscarriages, and I had 7 in between number 2 and 3. And I do strongly believe that was due to I received the flu vaccine each time. And also, I do believe the anthrax vaccine has some issues. It caused some issues as well. But one of my initiatives that I'm trying to champion on the outside as I'm retired is that I do believe and strongly believe, so if you've got any listeners that are willing to put me in the right contact with the right people, that women, nursing and pregnant women in the military should have freedom of medical choice, what goes into their body and where they give birth. Because I have never been able to choose where I give birth. If it's a D facility, our military treatment facility, guess where I have to go? I have to go to the D facility. So if it's a facility that has high rates of C-sections, that's on base, I have to go to that facility. I have no choice. I cannot choose a birthing clinic. I can't give birth at home. I can't pay for a midwife to help me do whatever it is that I feel is necessary. Never mind the fact when you're nursing, I had given birth to my third and I was forced to get the MMR while I was still in the hospital because they said my titers came back. I'm like, I'm nursing. Can I not wait? Nope, you don't have a choice. there's a lot of resources out there that shows that vaccination during pregnancy is not safe. It is not. And so, and also even the messenger RNA from the COVID vaccine, it's through the breast milk. It is affecting babies. You can totally look it up. And it's just one of those things where you just want to stay as clean as possible when you're growing a human. That human has nothing to do with the military. You should be given that freedom of choice. And so if anybody knows the best way that I can tackle this problem, because I'm just telling anybody and everybody I can, this is something that needs to change. And we're not touchable anyways for a year after giving birth. So what does it matter? It doesn't matter. Now, maybe the day of your deployment, that 1 year's up and you're ready to deploy, you get caught up, whatever, unless you have a religious exemption, etc. But you should at least let us have that time.
You've been through a lot during your military career and just trying to stay healthy with the family and just being rooted as like the family being center in your life. Like, how did you stay so grounded with your faith? Because you have been bringing faith up a lot, being a Christian, and stuff like that. So how, despite everything that was going essentially almost kind of against you, how did you stay so grounded?
Well, I had my husband who understood what I was facing at work every day. So it was, for me, that was probably first and foremost there. Secondly, if you open your eyes and your heart and your mind to the people that you work with, chances are that there's quite a few Christians that are in your mix that just, are not able to speak up because we're not allowed to, right? But there are Bible studies that happen, and those groups do form on every base where they meet. And I've dove into those whenever I could. And then just knowing that I had a family to support, or that supported me. And then lastly was staying here. My faith grew through the service, but it really rooted once we stayed put here in Virginia with our church, and then allowing my husband to take the role of being the leader. Because for the longest time, I mean, he's a retired captain, and I'm a retired lieutenant colonel. Technically, I outrank him. Something that I recently realized was that I was looking at men as my peers and not as men. I wasn't looking at them for their masculinity and what they provide that's different. I was just looking at them as peers, right? And so as I've gotten out, I've started to switch over to, he is the leader, he is the masculine, he is the one that I need to follow, and I need to follow him. Even if I disagree with it, I'm still going to voice it. I'm not going to buy it. It just, to be able to have that relationship with my husband now has been much better. And yeah, let's say about that.
So let's talk about transitioning out, because now you said that you are a stay-at-home mom, correct? But you're also still very much involved with different things. So how did it go from going from active duty to guard to transitioning to being a civilian?
So I will tell you that when you join the Air National Guard, they hand you a smile. So if you haven't learned about it, you need to learn about it. You become a master of your own destiny, which is so much better. Active duty is the easy button. That's what I always tell everybody. Active duty moves you where they need you. You have no say, so you don't have to worry about making decisions. Whereas the Air National Guard, you can actually choose where you want to be and what you want to do. And it couldn't have been better. It couldn't have been a better experience. The men and women in the Air National Guard are just amazing, and they are not second-class citizens. That's what active duty sometimes thinks. That is not the case. There are very, very strong and capable people in the Air National Guard, and I love them to pieces. So serving with them, it felt like a brotherhood. It felt like a family. It was absolutely what I needed for the end of my career. And then transitioning out, again, as I mentioned earlier with the COVID vaccine, I was not ready for it. So we were not financially ready for it because we had not been saving like we should have been. And I was not emotionally ready because I was still moving forward. I was still pushing towards the next mark. And when that happened, it was like a cold shower, like just shut it down. And when you put your flight suit in the attic, that's a wake-up call. You don't realize that your identity is the military until it's gone. And as a female veteran, I'm not a feminist by any means in that the current feminist mindset, I guess. But when you walk around the commissary of the BX, as you said earlier off camera, nobody thinks of you as a vet because you're female. And so you park in the vet space. Oh, it must be your husband's truck. No. It doesn't make me happy either when I'm faced with that. It's the ego, and I'm supposed to stay humble and everything and all that. And it's an ego hit when, most people don't think that you're a veteran. And honestly, in the veteran circles, the women are not as invited in the veteran circles that I've been learning and seeing. It's just not something especially among the older veterans. It's just we're not considered. We didn't serve, and so that's tough. That's been hard. But beyond that, the military gives you your purpose. They give you your next step. They give you your carrot. Here's the thing you have to strive for: the award or the promotion or the OPR bullet or whatever the case may be. They give you your purpose. And so you always have something to strive for. Whereas on the outside, while that you're done, there's none of that structure anymore. And so you have to set those goals. You have to set that structure. And it's freedom is scary. It's I don't know. It's freeing at first, but then after a while, you're like, okay, so now what do I do? The house is clean. Now what do I do? So that can be tough. So I've been dabbling all over the place trying to find that purpose. And yes, my children and my husband are my primary purpose. But at the same token, there is still another depth of purpose that I'm still searching for, and I have yet to really dive into it and find it. But I have. It was really nice. It's all about connections, right? So even after you get out, just keep making those connections with anybody and everybody. No idea where it's going to lead. And one of them was with a group called STARS, and so they introduced me to two individuals that needed help. They needed guidance because they were Coast Guard swimmers that needed guidance on their health. And so I was able to help them and help them understand what had happened to them after the COVID vaccine. And so they went from 23 years of swimming over a mile a day just about to not being able to do anything after the shot. And so it's not just them, but it's like almost our whole unit. So it's really sad what's happened. So that was good because that helped me find a little bit of purpose there. But also I'm still working with a lot of the people I met through Children's Self-Defense behind the scenes, trying to help with whatever I can, legislation or pushing initiatives forward.
So let's talk a little bit about that because, and I've talked on previous episodes too, that when people do transition, it's very hard to find that identity because that military was your identity. Like, how are you navigating that? Because you mentioned connections, but then you're also involved with various organizations.
So I feel like it's throwing darts at a dartboard. So it's like, okay, so what is going to stick? Where is my passion? What is it that's going to work out? Where is it that God wants me to go? And what am I supposed to be doing? And literally that's what I've been doing is like just putting out myself anywhere and everywhere I can. And whatever sticks is what I feel like, okay, let me see if I can run with this a little bit further. Let's see if this can happen. But I also don't want to dive into something because there's been a lot of opportunities where I could either go back to work. My family would mutiny if I left. If I went back to work full time outside the house, I wouldn't have a family to come back to. But there's that. But then there's also a lot of these other opportunities that require, even remote, even if you're at home, it still requires, 50 hours a week on the computer or on the phone or something like that, where I'm just not present. Even if I'm home, I'm not present. And so I've really made it a point to prioritize being present over finding that purpose. And so it's getting better. It's getting easier. Again, not there yet, but trying to put my priorities in place is, I think, what has been the most important. And my husband and I, we sit down and talk about what those look like on occasion. And I think it's important to have those discussions where you really truly evaluate, okay, so what are we doing here? Is this something that lends to our purpose? Is this something that helps us financially? Does this help the kids grow and learn? Because we homeschool. So for us, that's where the travel part is important. And so we are going to Niagara Falls at the end of the month in our RV. So yeah, so that should be good to help show the kids and teach the kids about all of that. But in order to do that, we have to make sacrifices financially elsewhere because I didn't roll into the big DoD job by design because that wasn't, making money has not ever been the first priority in my life. So I think for anybody that has transitioned and they're having difficulties, they're really going to sit down and evaluate what their priorities are and what what's their 1 year outlook look like? What's their 5 year outlook look like? Where do they want to be in 10 years? So you got to make sure that you're thinking that way. It's timeline management. That's what the Air Force teaches us, right?
So where do you guys see yourself in the next few years? Because I know life is a journey, right? Like it's not like, okay, by this date, we're going to be X, Y, and Z. But since family's super important to you, like, how do you guys navigate that? And what do you guys see for your future?
Well, my oldest is 14, so that's a big one. So the next 5 years, let's hope that we taught him what he needed to know to go to college or be a tradesman or whatever the case is. So that's what our next 5 years looks like focusing for him. But for my husband and I would like to purchase another rental at some point. We do have a short-term rental down in the Outer Banks, and I would like to at least branch out to maybe 2 or 3 more. And from there, it's really just, does God want me to stay where I'm at? We're serving in the church, most likely. We're not planning to leave anytime soon from this area. So it's really just growing and getting our kids fed with the right amount of information they need to be good adults. And that's a huge undertaking, and that's something that I'm learning should not be secondary. Our kids and their feeding our experiences that we have and all of our leadership and project management skills and all of those things need to be fed into them so that they can succeed faster than we did, right? Because how many of us took years to learn what we should have learned, in high school? Had we been homeschooled, we probably would have learned a whole lot faster.
You also mentioned about being still and being mindful. And I feel like in today's society, we're always like fast paced, right? Like we're like on the go, 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 go. And we're always thinking about the future, but sometimes we're not present with the present. So talk us through how you individually are trying to be more mindful, and then how you and your husband kind of set that up for your family.
It's a great question. I fail every day at it. It's not something I have perfected because I have made it a point, and that's the first step, is you have to recognize that you're on your phone looking at nonsense that does nothing to lend to your family. And if anything, it lends to anger or being frustrated or upset, right? Because let's be honest, the news is just awful. And so it doesn't really help. So why are you looking at it, right? And that's something I learned with working at Children's Health Defense, because I had to watch the train wreck every day to be able to feed the information that they needed. And so that just consumed my time. It consumed me. And that at least woke me up to realize that I cannot live in that world. And so both of us, we try to do Bible time in the morning where there's nothing else around and we just do what we can. Now, my husband gets better Bible time than I do because my 3-year-old's in my lap or saying I want this, but I guess, 2 of them. But yeah, so starting off the day with peace and stillness helps, and not being in a hurry and not making appointments, early in the morning helps us settle into a day that's a little bit more relaxing. And I will say, as a mom, the other moms and dads out there that might be listening to this, don't forget to stop and play with your kids, even when you're in the middle of a task. And that is something I have a hard time with. I'm a taskmaster, right? So it's the military ingrained in us, right? Can't be broken away from something I'm doing. I have to finish before I can stop and go do something else. No, sometimes it's okay. The dishes can wait. The laundry can wait. Whatever you're doing on your computer, it can wait. Just stop. And if your kid asks you to pick up a fake phone and play with it, you pick up the fake phone and you play. So usually their playtime, it's like cats anyway, so it only lasts for a minute or two. So you might as well just take that time, just take that break, that mental break for a second, connect with your kid and have fun and be silly. Don't be afraid to be silly. Don't be afraid to do those things. And among that prioritization of schooling, we've also prioritized their activities. So we try to make a way to financially send them to camp and do a few other kid things where they're getting to spend time. I call it controlled independence. So you put them in a position where what's happening, so it's controlled, but they have independence and they think they're like all free, right? So you find those spots and those places for them to explore and get some leadership experience, get their feet wet. And so one of the sayings I also say too is, with my kids, I hate tattletelling. I can't stand it. And so I always tell them, like, you don't jump your chain of command. You don't do that. You take it up right now with your brother or sister, whoever it is you're playing with. You fix it there. So conflict resolution, right? You fix it there and you make it better. Unless somebody's bleeding or needs stitches or needs to go to the ER, you don't come to me. You figure it out. So there's a military thing in there.
Because I actually like that idea. Like, I need to implement that in my household.
They know that they do not come to me unless it's done. So.
I'm going to have to start trying that out now.
It works. Trust me.
Especially because you're right. They could easily probably settle it between the two.
Well, they got to figure it out. They got to figure out one who's the leader, one who's going to be the person that bends. They got to figure out compromise. They got to figure out the conflict. They got to share. They got to figure it out. Either that or they're going to duke it out. And sometimes you just got to let it happen. I mean,
that's fair. That's fair. Like, what advice would you give someone who does want to be a stay-at-home mom after military service?
Well, that's a good one because I actually have another individual at church who I've been asked to help as well. She's a police officer, and so she's having a hard time figuring out what it's like to be that feminine woman, right? So being that God-given woman, we got to remember that meekness is not weakness, right? So being meek is strength under control. And women have more power over their family and their men than they know. If you really truly took a step back and evaluate the power you have in building up your husband and encouraging your kids and bringing them to the place where they should be through a myriad of ways, you would embrace that more so than this is where I'm talking about the feminist idea is that the woman has to be in charge, and we got to fix things, and we got to make things like we got to fix our man. He's messed up. He's wrong, and we got to point out all of his faults and all of these things. You're never going to get anywhere because the husband's just going to dig his heels, not change anything. And so by being a prior military woman who was very much the leader in a room of men a lot of the times, because I'm not afraid to speak out or speak up when something's not looking right. So I would constantly do that. That was something I had to temper when I came home. And finding my femininity has been a journey, and embracing it too. We are not men. We are who we are, and we need to know what our strengths are, and we need to use that to be equal parents, equal members of the household with their husband. It's men and women are cleaved together and become one. It's not a man is in charge of everything and the woman's a doormat. Absolutely not. The woman is not the one that's, I was the breadwinner, but that doesn't mean that I was the one in charge either. So it's very much an equal relationship. And so, but it's equal using your strengths and helping them build up and encourage their weaknesses. I just believe so often, especially how many women get together and gossip over how awful their husbands are. That's never going to fix anything. That's never going to help. That's never going to encourage them because a man's only going to live up to the way you see him. If you see him as a failure, he's going to live up to that. So if you see him as this brave, awesome man that can do no wrong or do anything, there's certain things that I know he's best at, and I don't give him the things that he's not good at. So that's my way of encouraging him to complete a task or whatever. I think it's very important that we do a better job of encouraging our men because our men could be very, very strong and very, very capable if women just really stood behind them and supported them with whatever ideas they may have. And you can, of course, shift if it's a bad idea. You could steer it another way if you need to. There are ways, but we women have way we ever really recognize. I honestly do believe that men are just super soft on the inside, and they get injured very easily with words and action, and that's where it starts at home with wives. And when we can make them feel good about who they are, they can do anything, they can conquer anything, and they're going to serve you even better. They're going to want to do things for you when you support them. And so finding all of that and figuring that out when you leave the military, it is difficult. And I went from a stay-at-home mom of 0 to one of 4, So I wasn't home with my kids all day. What? No,
it can be a lot, yeah.
Just go and you just leave. Just give me a moment. Just give me a little bit of time. Sometimes it means next too. You gotta give yourself grace through everything, and you gotta be willing to step back and evaluate how you're reacting, how you're treating your children. If you're always angry, then you need to step back and you need to evaluate that and just look into their eyes and look at yourself through their eyes. I'm not the perfect mom at all, and there are many times that I do get angry, and I shouldn't, but I have to take a step back and I have to realize the impact that has on them. Because how many times have you heard your kids say the things that you say all the time, and you're like,
What are some lessons learned that if you could go back, you would change?
Military?
Just like the military and transitioning, and then just kind of essentially your journey.
There were some instances that I still kicked myself in the military for not stepping up and accepting offers that came my way. There were a few times where people had wanted me to do certain jobs, and I was just like, no. So I would say, if someone's coming to you with something that they think you would be good at, give it a go. Don't self-eliminate is one of the sayings that we have a lot, is don't self-eliminate. So if somebody I became a speechwriter. I'm not an English major. Where did that come from? I just had given a brief and then I was asked to join the team. I'm like, okay. So if I had said no to that, that was later on in my career. So I was willing and mistake of saying no previously. And I said, of course, yes to that. And it was an amazing experience. It really was. To transition, I would definitely make sure that you keep the guard or reserves in your back pocket, your hip pocket, if you feel like your family needs to be grounded and rooted. There have been when I worked with the generals. I mean, I saw the ivory tower. I was up in the the highest echelons of the Air Force, and I saw all of the colonels and generals and their family relationships, and there were some that were very bad. And so I would suggest that you keep the guard reserve in your hip pocket if you find that your family's struggling because of the moves or your ability to be there for a lot of events. And don't be afraid to take that 180 out decision to support your family and make sure your family's healthy, because you surely don't want a family that's not going to be there when you do retire. As far as transition goes, TAPS is not going to teach you the loss of identity and the loss of camaraderie and the loss of purpose. So if anything, before you get out, you need to recognize that's going to be an issue. You won't know what it feels like until you're out. But at least you can have a game plan as to what you're going to do on the outside. Be prepared for a lot of change. We were a family that chose not to move. I can't imagine a family that retires, separates, moves. They have to learn a whole new medical system. They have to figure out jobs, schools. I mean, it's a complete change, and that's a lot. That's a lot of change, especially for a family. And know that your family is going to have a hard time with all of that change as well. The other thing I would say is I wish we had switched to TRICARE Select over Prime during the time that we got out, because it took so long for my medical VA disability stuff to happen. That wasn't collected properly before the first submission. And so I had to go to a bunch of primary care doctors to get referrals, and then go back to the PCN to get a referral, and then back to the PCN to get a referral. And so that process took me the better part of 3 years to have to keep going back to the referral gatekeeper to get the care and the diagnoses that I needed. Done TRICARE Select, I could have gone directly to these doctors without the need for a referral. So that was a hindsight 2020 thing for me. But you also need to make sure you have at least 3 months of savings saved up, because my pay stopped for 3 months because something was messed up. And that's actually another thing that I discovered, that I put it out there and tried to make some noise about it, is that there's an entire month that the VA is not paying you for disability pay, and it's your first month. Because of a United States code that says they can't prorate your first month of disability pay. So they don't start so your pay effective date and your disability effective date are not the same. And so that very first month of disability, nobody, since as far back as we know, has been paid for that first month of disability. So the VA is not illegal, it's just not morally right? So somebody needs to take that on, and the first month of transition is the toughest financially, and yet we're not getting paid for that first month. Well, we're disabled, right? So why are we not getting paid for it? Oh, just because they can't figure out a way to pay you for 30 days versus 31, or 29 versus 31. Yes, they can. Sensibility happens all the time in the Guard Reserve, where they come off. They're in the civilian sector, and they'll work for one drill weekend. The disability will stop for that weekend, and then it will start again on Monday. So the VA absolutely knows how to prorate disability. And so it's just something that doesn't happen. It needs to be contact your congressman in your state to bring this up. And there's an article that I published through the Gateway Pundit and Epoch Times with J.M. Phelps to highlight this issue. And yet we've done everything we can. We've sounded it from the rooftops, and it's until it gets in the hands of the right person, nothing's going to change. So.
Yeah, I agree with that, especially with like the VA. They don't pay you. They pay you after the month. So it's not even... Like, there was one when I filled in because of dependence, and that, because they're going to safeguard a lot of information. They don't want to pay you. So, like, even though my first 2 kids were delivered on military bases, they didn't update my record. So they didn't have any knowledge. Like, the VA system didn't say that they were my dependents, even though I delivered on a VA on a military hospital. And I didn't even know until recently, a couple months ago, that you could actually claim dependents for your VA disability. Yeah. So my oldest is 6 and I just added him as a dependent. So per kid, you get an X amount of money per month until they're 18. And then so because I was not aware and the systems don't talk, I missed out on probably thousands of dollars because it wasn't in the system. And again, the systems don't talk. And then when I filed that, I was like, well, they didn't pay me. They're like, oh, we pay at the end of the month. So then it goes back to kind of what you were saying. Like everything is always like a month behind. It's very frustrating.
Yes. That's crazy. That's crazy they never told you that.
Yeah. And again, like the systems don't talk to each other. So, I always tell people now, because I've realized that, is always check your va.gov and see what your records say and constantly update your records because they're not going to do it for you. And you kind of have to make sure that you advocate for yourself.
And on that note, for a lesson learned is, so the way they do your initial VA submittal from your records, it's called Alta. It's that top report that is put together, and it's an AI generated report where it basically pulls whatever is the preponderance of information in your file and puts it in an electronic format in the front. And that is what most of like the VFW or VES, or not VES, but any of the veterans service organizations, the VSOs, that's what they submit as your list of disabilities. Well, that Alta record is, again, AI generated from the data in your record. It doesn't always pull the handwritten notes. It doesn't always pull some of the information. So you really have to go through your records and do an actual scrub. And my husband did that for me, and he found an additional 12 items that were not even listed in my Alta record. So, right. So he used to, when my husband was medically retired, he then worked for the VA up in Anchorage for a year. And so he was a VSR rep. So he learned all about disability percentages and that sort of thing. So he was able to go through my records and find additional items that were not even listed. And so that's something to keep in mind, that even though it's a generated report on the front of your medical record to submit, there is probably more information that's inside. Now, it takes a lot for someone to look through it, and you have to really know what you're looking for. But
yeah, that's definitely good to know. Yeah, the whole VA system needs to be revamped. And yeah, I have my own thoughts on that. With that being said, how can people get in contact with you if they have more information or want to stay connected?
So I am on LinkedIn. So it's Jackie Frederick, and my call sign is Mona. So if you see that in there, Mona. But my email address is jackiefrederick@ymail.com. Not Gmail, it's Ymail. It's Yahoo short. So it's JACKIE and then Frederick. So Fred E. Rick. FREDERICK.
Awesome. And I'll put that in the show notes as well. So as we're kind of wrapping up, first off, thank you so much for sharing your experiences and your insights on your military journey. But for the people who are listening, what is one key takeaway that you hope they take home with?
Just give yourself grace on when you're serving, when you're out, all of it. And just know that you're not alone. Each one of us, while our experiences are different, a lot of us face the same issues with that purpose finding in the military as well as outside. And so you just be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up, and really just let the Lord follow you, or not follow you, let the Lord guide you where you need to go. And when you do that, and that's when things will start to fall into place. When you stop pushing, that's something I did very early on, was push. But when I stopped, guess what? Things started falling into place because people started seeing what it is that I was. And so I just needed to sit back and let things happen. So give yourself grace.